Assalamualaikum, good morning, salam sejahtera everybody. My name is Azizi Bahauddin and a lecturer and also a director for Creative Design House from Universiti Sains, Malaysia. I'll be presenting to you today about the cultural narrative in the Malay Design Heritage. Okay, the presentation will be broken down into a few areas. We'll talk about narrative, design and architecture, heritage, other traditional houses, and at the end of the presentation, we'll be talking about the summary of what we'll talk about today. Right, for information for everyone, the narrative is a form of a question because I'm interested in doing something like this because when you deal with architecture, you talk about the philosophy, you talk about the culture, so it involves oral tradition. So from there, people will understand how the architecture is being built up through the narratives. Right, in terms of narratives, there are a few areas you can look at in terms of main thing in terms of architecture is the visual data. But a part of the narratives, they talk about the strong cultural values, oral traditions, poems, metaphors, adages, philosophies. So those are like, for example, pantun, syair, or peribahasa and simpulan bahasa. All those things are part of the intangible culture that being transferred or been translated into the tangible culture of architecture. Right, I will talk to you about the typical traditional Malay house first because this is the first one that people should know about architecture, about how the Malay architecture started before. This is how it looks like. Okay, if you look at it, there are a few areas that you can break down. If you remember, maybe for the young generation, you don't have that opportunity to view this kind of rumah kampung. But if you look at the diagram there, the drawing, they talk about multifunctional storage area. They talk about garden plants, which people use a lot for food and also for medicinal purposes. I also had the opportunity to look into these medicinal plants where people use it for spa. The Malay spa, which is unheard of, that people use it for rejuvenating or what I call it healing, or this what I call it diseases or disampu hantu, whatever kind of thing. But for this talk, I will only talk about architecture. Okay, these are the environment of the architecture you can look at in terms of the construction materials, which again, they can be collected from the surrounding, like the bamboos or like the coconut fronds for the attics, all those things. And looking at the drainage and sewerage system, if you understand how it is working for the traditional Malay house, most of the drainage happens in the kitchen area, where the water from cooking or whatever things that you use is all poured down onto the ground where it feeds or the animals that you rear underneath the house. And lastly, the construction is always lightweight material. Again, when we're comparing between the traditional architecture and the architecture now, the traditional architecture back then used a lot of lightweight material which is not heat gain, unlike now where you have to use a lot of bricks and concrete where most of the time you need fans and air conditioning for your house. But back then, the lightweight material absorbed very less heat. Okay, this is the typical floor plan for the architecture. If you look at it, if you can see the spaces there, it's basically an open space. Okay, there's no partitioning like what we have now, because the architecture nowadays requires privacy. Back then, there's no privacy. The only privacy that I can provide for the married couples, only with curtains or very lightweight material. So most of the time, this house is meant for community, okay? Where people come together, where people go into the anjong, where the veranda is, and then go into Serambi Anjong or Serambi Gantong, and then go to Rumah Ibu, where the big space is, where people come together and have kenduri or food or whatever things that they don't want to discuss. But that area is meant for the community, not meant for individual. Although the house belongs to somebody, but the house is meant for the community. So that's how the back then the masyarakat of Malay people. Right, these are the examples of the surrounding where plants are being planted. For example, the banana trees, coconut trees, tapioca trees, papaya trees, all those are source of food for everyday use. For example, like the banana, again, this is part of my research I did up in the north for shade and food sources, but nowadays it's very difficult to find trees around the house because they think they can put more houses, they bring more money. But back then, you talk about the well-being of the users of the houses. Right, I like to talk about this one, but yeah, maybe later. Talk about domains for gender, according to the spaces in the architecture. The domains for women are usually the back of the house. It's where the kitchen is, or the corridor, where the salang is. Again, these are, they call it places for membawang, lah, what people say nowadays. But anyway, like my friend over there said, bukan membawang, dipanggil bawang-bawang, instead of membawang. But anyway, this is a place where people gossips, but mainly no men are allowed to go into these places, because it's only meant for women. Right, for example, this is a veranda where it's quite luxurious. Because, the women will go there and prepare food in the kitchen. And this is what I mean by the passageway and the kitchen. These are the female domain. So very difficult to get men to come into these places because I bet the women don't like the men to disturb them preparing for cooking, you know, but anyway, that's the way it is. Right, if you look at the, again, back then the materials being used for that is all from the atap nipa, or the nipa front, where you use for the roof. This material is very waterproof. It takes about 2 or 3 years to replace. And after that, you have to replace again, which you can get very cheaply from the surrounding. You can just cut it and then layer it, and then it will keep you from the rain or from the heat of the sun. This is another one that's really quite interesting, okay? Although the kitchen is the domain for the female, there's one area where in the kitchen they see a lot of holes in the floor. I'm sure you know, some of you will know what that means. What is that for, right? For the old people. But for the young people, I think I'll have to explain. Apart from the hole for pouring down water onto the ground or provide food for the chickens or dogs underneath the house, this place is for to bathe the dead, okay? Memandikan mayat, yeah? So back then, this is what they provide all the time for the back of the kitchen, back of the house, in the kitchen. So again, at the same time, it's placed for drainage as well as for ventilation. So how it's being built is all well thought of about. When you're alive, you're at the front of the house. When you're dead, you're at the back of the house. So that's how you prepare away from the prying eyes of people, because when you are bathing the dead people or the dead, you need some privacy as well. So it's at the back of the house. Again, this is the back of the kitchen where most of the floor materials are made from bamboo or what they call it, coconut tree trunks. So these are all very, very renewable energy or materials where you can get it very, very cheaply, because bamboo takes about 2 years to replant, and coconut you can get it anywhere you like. Yeah. Right, the male dominant now. Okay, the domain area is the ceramic gantong, where they lepak, okay, where people receive guests from the community, and then that's where they put the manifest. Before any important thing need to be discussed, have to be brought into the main area, the rumah ibu. So again, the ceramic gantong is to receive guests, but when things are more important, you brought it into the house. So these are again the hierarchy of spaces when dealing with the community. Again, for example, these are the veranda that you can look at the way it's being done in design. Right, okay. Again, you don't see this anymore in Malaysia unless you have very rich persons, a lot of money, because to build this kind of architecture requires a lot of money nowadays. That's why most of the architecture are based on terrace houses or apartments, condominiums, which again are not really friendly to the environment. But back then, if you look at this, these are how the traditional Malay house looks like, where a lot of ventilation, where the house is raised above the ground, so to allow wind to flow through, and also big windows from the back and the front for cross ventilation, big open space, no partitioning, so most airy space is in the middle of the house, and the roof, again, in Malaysia, because of the rain, we need a sloping roof, not a flat roof. That doesn't work in Malaysia at all, okay? The sloping roof is meant for, again, ventilation and to provide shades and to allow the wind to go through this shape of the pyramid. Okay, this is the scientific part of it. When we study architecture, we look at where the ventilation should be at the body level, because with this kind of architecture, you don't need air conditioning or fans for that. So you just require all this wind to go through the houses, okay? All these things allows you to have more comfort in the house and then as compared to what we have now. Lighting level, again, we need a lot of lighting now because most of these internal spaces are being blocked up and partitioned, and because of that, we don't get enough natural lighting. So if you look at the way it was done before, the material allows some sort of lighting to come through from the translucency or the transparency. But unlike now, although the big windows are at the front, but since the unit of the houses are long, the lighting in the middle of the house are quite minimal, so that you need extra artificial lighting for that. Right, overhangs and exposed vertical areas, again, it allows a lot of shade for the users of the houses, and vegetation allows shades, and also allow cooling for the system of the houses. Building materials, as I talked just now about renewable, lightweight, and construction materials, where, again, most of the resources are available throughout the surrounding of the house. So from that, you can use that again and again. So that's part of the trying to set up the perimeter of this discussion today, the traditional Malay house. Okay. The next one, I will talk about the heritage as part of my topic today, about the cultural and oral traditions, about the tangible and intangible cultural aspects, heritage design and sustainable design components. Okay, this part maybe it's a bit sensitive to some people, but through my research, what we studied before is that there are beliefs in heritage design based from the animism, from Hindu Buddhism and Islam, and now a bit of Christianity. So the people are still Malay people, but the beliefs that are embedded in the culture are the animistic beliefs, the Hindu Buddhist beliefs, and also the Islamic belief, which again now we are concentrating on the teaching of Islam at the moment. But if you can see that Islam was brought in with the adaptation of the animism and Hinduism into Malaysia. First thing first, I know what very important in Malay culture is called bamboo shoot. Okay, most people don't know that bamboo shoot also exists in architecture, right? For example, at the eaves of the roof, yang kelok-kelok, those are bamboo shoot motifs. Okay, I want to explain to you what bamboo shoot means. It's a multifunctional plant. The bamboo grove is similar to the human grove. It's a symbol of community, tolerance, harmony. As for example, you can listen to you can read about the peribahasa, bagai aur dengan tebing, melentur buluh biar dari rebungnya. Those are all related to the Malay community from the bamboo shoot that's being reflected into the architecture. And then the triangular shape depicts the universe. Okay, every shape of the house of the roof is a triangular shape. From there, you express Gunung Sari or the heaven. Yeah? And also to express the beauty of the universe as life begins from something beautiful before you go into the next level, something beautiful again. So this again, the process of from moving to one area to another area. Right, we talked about that just now. We had a discussion with Sarah about all this triangular shape. But in Sufism, okay, when you try to relate the architecture to Sufism, this is what came out. Okay, the triangular is divided into 4 areas, where Allah is at the top, where Arash or the omnipresence. Yeah, okay. So there's important to know that Allah is everywhere. But again, if you look at the division of the architecture, the triangle, the Alam Shahada is where at the bottom, yeah, where they're very, very stable. And then you go to the Alam Gaib and Alam Kubur. Again, or this transition between one area to another area, and then until you meet God, hopefully. Yeah. Right, so in terms of carving, again, we can see that in Malay architecture, there are, for example, the teratai or lotus. Lotus is the mother of all flowers in Southeast Asia, okay? So that's why in animism, in Hindu Buddhism, in Islam, they're also related to lotus, actually. Not too many people know that. But if you break it down into the meaning or the philosophy behind lotus, I will describe to you later on, okay? And the carving at the bottom is called kenanga or ilang-ilang. Right, okay, if you look at the lotus, there are many types. There are 4 lotus petal lotus, 8 petal lotus, or 16 petal lotus. It all comes in 4 or 18 or 32. But if you look at it, the 8 petal lotus are divided into 8 parts of the bodies, because we believe that without, if we shoot short of one part of the body doesn't function very well. So you need to improvise to make it work. But that's how it is when you divide it, the 8 petal lotus into the divisions of the body. And the beliefs in flower, for example, if you can look like this, okay. The flower symbolizes the dependency of humans of the divine power. There are 7 types of flowers which are sacred to the Malay community. Okay? They believe that the power is to rejuvenate and to heal. For example, if you heard of mandi bunga before, so those are the parts of where you required a lot of flowers, for the 7 types of flowers, to make it stronger, to heal your body from any sicknesses. And the flowers must be small, white or cream, and with strong fragrance. And the triangle is also the motif from the mountain to symbolize the relationship between the 3 entities in the tripartite. The motif from water symbolizes fertility, but in terms of tripartite are divided into 3 areas: the environment, humanity, and God. Persekitaran, kemanusiaan, dan ketuhanan. So these are the 3 things. The human have to look into persekitaran in order for you to understand ketuhanan. So those things are the 3 things that interrelated. Right, I'm sure you know about this as well. The belief of elements in human body, again, divided into 4 categories or 4 elements: the earth, water, fire, and wind. If you're firstborn, you're earth. Your secondborn, you're water. Your thirdborn, you're fire. Wind, you're the fourthborn. So you're the 4th, maybe child in the family. From that, it repeats again. So this, again, got to do with the comfort level of the house. Again, if you believe the philosophy of the Malay culture, because if your husband and wife are from fire, both from fire elements, that house will burn down. So that kind of belief, yeah. So fire should go with earth, or water can go with wind, something like that. So those are things that you can look at how to make your house more comfortable. But again, these are the beliefs that you should look at it very, very carefully. Okay, these are, in case you don't know, the traditional sacred flowers. There are 7 types: the mawar, bunga tanjung, bunga cina, bunga cempaka, Cambodia, Penang, and Malo. These are very small flowers, but difficult to get nowadays because most of the trees are being chopped down already. So again, this, if you look into the mani bunga, these are the, what they call it, the recipe for mani bunga. Yeah, the flowers I'm going to show you: Panjipani, Ilang Ilang, Jasmine, all the 3 flowers together. Right, this exists in the carving of the house, for example, the Teratai and Kananga. Right, decorative finishes, for example, the bamboo partition with flower motifs, again, that's for the wall, and the wood carving over the door. Okay, the next topic I'm going to talk about is the other traditional houses that I've been doing research on. The first one will be Rumah Bujang, or the bachelor's house. I'll explain to you later what it means. Then Rumah Melayu Melaka, Melanau Tall Long House in Muka Sarawak, and Rungus Long House in Kudat Sabah. Right. The direct translation for Rumah Bujang is bachelor's house, but I'm trying to find the right word for that in English. But Rumah Bujang in this context means this house has no rooms. Okay? Bila orang cakap kalau air bujang, meaning there's no sugar, right? So this Rumah Bujang, that means there's no room in this house, an open space. So that's the Rumah Bujang with the bujang at the front house. No. Okay, so the components of this architect is talking about the construction, finishes, space planning, decoration philosophy, and cultural issues. Okay, you can see that only the partition is from the beginning, from the balcony into the open space or big area. It's very quite open. But unfortunately, I only found 1 Rumah Bujang left in Malaysia, which is in Kedah. And it's a sad thing because not too many people like that anymore, because they said Rumah Bujang is too individualistic, not communal. But hey, again, what happens to whatever happens, you know. And then this is a construction of the Rumah Bujang, how the materials are being gathered together, the main house, the kitchen. Again, if you can read the materials on that, it's about the thatched roof, gable. Now, the reason for that layered levels is to allow a lot of ventilation, to show hierarchy of space and the importance of spaces. Okay? Again, you can look at it, the column, and they must be all level because that allows winds to flow into the houses. Okay, opening in racks, I want to talk about it later on when Sarah is going to ask me the question later on about this. This is what people use. The Malay call it balabas. I think that's called balabas, where they put for drying racks for the plates, after they wash the plates, the dishes, they put on the rack to dry out so naturally. Yeah? And the kitchen or the stove is at the left-hand side. Sloping roof, cross ventilation, lightweight materials, all just again the sustainable part of the rumah bujang. Woven bamboo for walls, again lightweight material. Open space again, sleeping area, and you see that the sleeping area is not private at all, it's very open, but at night time you just put curtain around it. Next, I'm going to talk about Rumah Melayu Melaka. Okay, this research is being done in Kampung Morton, Melaka. I'm sure those who are from Melaka know how this house looks like. Okay, the important thing about this architecture is because it has a cultural influence of the Chinese. Okay, that's why I want to show you. Again, the most important thing is that this Rumah Melaka is the only Malay architecture in Malaysia that has attics and courtyard. Okay, courtyard and also attics. This is how it looks like in the elevation. It must be 31 degrees, different kind of slope to let the wind flow again to cool down the house. Again, the salang in the middle of the passageway, back veranda, and the roof is very steep as well because of the rain. Right, all spaces have specific functions, like for this one, for example, this one is a veranda where the men's domain is. Again, women's domain is the kitchen at the back of the house, as usual. And veranda, again, like I said before, all this architecture, although they have different names, because they are governed by the cultural influence of the different states, but the basic understanding of the Malay architecture is still the same. The veranda is where they receive guests before they were brought into the house. Right, the unique components, the attic, the courtyard, and specially designed stone main steps for the cladded with tiles. These are the main important thing about the Melaka house, where the stones or the steps are made of tiles, actually imported from China before, but nowadays you can get it anywhere in Malaysia. This is one of the houses that I researched where it's a courtyard for Malay house, which is very unheard of. Usually courtyard belongs to the Rumah Peranakan, but the Chinese influence in the courtyard can be seen as Melaka house, Rumah Melayu Melaka. Yeah, with the opening in the middle to allow ventilation again to cool down the house. Yeah, you see the Melaka steps, the attic for the roof, and also the middle portion where the two roofs are combined together. But again, the story behind this Melaka house is that, from what I heard from the interview I did, if your daughter marries another man, they extended the house. So the same thing happens with the Minangkabau house in Negeri Sembilan. So this one is part of the cultural beliefs. Steps to the attic is very, very steep, but again, most of the time, this bedroom in the attic are meant for anak dara. So to protect them from any prying eyes. So, but you have to, the belief is that the steps are so steep that you can't get it to the place easily. So that's how no pain, no gain, that kind of thing. But again, it's meant for anak dara. And again, the surrounding of the house, you can see that a lot of plants, vegetable, fruit trees. Also provide privacy from sheltering, privacy in sheltering the house from prying eyes. Again, part of how they provide privacy for the houses. Again, if you've been to Kampung Morton in Melaka, it's a very small community where we've been transplanted from a different area into that area, but now it's been a heritage area where you can look at all this architecture being preserved by the Melaka state government. Back then, the roof is made of palm frond, so again waterproof but easily to get around the environment. And then in the attics, ledge for drying your plates, balustrades. Again, all these are the detail of the carving into your house. Again, if you notice that most of the carvings are based on flowers, again, they have a lot of meaning, philosophy behind it. The Chinese steps, again, this is in Kampung forgot somewhere, Kampung Duyong, yeah, that's away from city center. It's one of the houses that is really preserved the heritage of the Chinese architecture, part of the influence, where the steps are made of tiles, and also the column stumps. Right, so this is a part of the, again, one of the heritage that people don't really notice about. The next one I'm going to talk about, which I just got back from Muka about 2 weeks ago, or a week ago actually. It's unheard of again. It's a Melanau tall long house, Rumah Tinggi Melanau, Rumah Panjang Tinggi Melanau. Okay, only happened in Muka, but sadly there were only 3 houses left, and they are in very bad condition. The only one that's been preserved very well is in the Sarawak Cultural Village. Again, it's well preserved by the private firm. So you know where Muka is. It's about 1 hour flight from Kuching. It's right in the middle between Bintulu and Kuching and near Cebu. Right, again, this is one of the ethnic group in Malaysia that still practices caste system. Okay, I'll explain to you later on about it. But the area for that Muka Melanau communities are in Kampung Telian Tengah, Telian Hulu, and Telian Hilir. It's by the river. Okay. So I'll explain to you about the caste system. Okay, they believe that the Melanau people were brought in by the Sultan of Brunei into Muka by the river, on the mouth of the river, and also on the coastline. Again, we talk about the transition between darat and laut. So these are the places where Melanau people exist, because they believe that by building a house on the river mouth and also by the coastline, they can depend on the livelihood of the sea or the river for food, from fishing, whatever that thing is. As well as protecting them from the enemies of, especially the headhunters of Iban and Dayak. So the house was built, the unique part about this Melanau tall long house is about the highest we got is 40 feet from the ground. So again, how difficult that is to climb 40 feet from the ground and then protect them from the enemies. Yeah. This is how it looks like, the one in Sarawak Cultural Village. It's still there, still being preserved, but if you notice that the height and all this material are from belian tree or belian wood, which is very, 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 very tough, very hard wood, and difficult to get now. And one column like that costs about 3,000 ringgit already. So maybe the price goes up as high as maybe 5,000. So depending on the supply of this material, that one was done because they wanted to last a long time. Okay, this tall, long house has a lot of bedrooms. It's meant for the community as well. So you can see that the units can be divided maybe into 50 families, depending on the requirements. The wedded couple and a married couple will live on the second floor, called Ngayan Tudui. But the young people or the bachelors usually on the first floor. Again, the task is to protect the family from enemies. So again, the level of the architecture is done in several levels. Empty space underneath the house for storage area, also for chicken coop, paddy storage, or whatever things like you put it down there. That's how it looks like in terms of front elevation. There are 20 to 30 living spaces for this one, 40 feet above the floor. Right? Okay, the belian tree trunks, nibong trunks. Again, these people also depend on sago. Okay, when they produce sago from the sago tree, they use river to transport all the sago trunks and then put everything underneath the house and start producing sago from the tree trunks. Okay, one interesting factor about this architecture is the slits in the floor. Okay. Again, because it's to protect the people from being attacked by the Dayak or by the Iban, by having small hole, but able for them to pour hot water onto the enemies. So these are things that we gather from that. And also, again, like any other traditional Malay houses, the Melanau house has an open space at the front where they perform bebayo. Again, I'm sure Dr. Philip knows about it. Bebayo is performed sometimes to heal from sicknesses, or to required for maybe good fortune in the fish, in the whatever catching fish from the sea and the water, the river. And this is how it looks like, the steps, again, to climb up to the level. It's not easy to climb because I did try, and then you easily fall if you don't really hold on to the rail, okay? The last one I want to talk about is the Rumus Longhouse in Sabah. Again, Dr. Zaimi will know about this one as well. Again, not too many people heard about this one. Again, the sad thing about this Rumus Longhouse, there are only 3 left, but from what I heard last year, only 2 left. So I will explain to you which one has been demolished already, for newer houses. The kudat is at the ears part of the head of the dog. We call it the head of the dog. So the 2 ears is where the kudat is on the Kudat Peninsula. And near the Simpang Mengayau, okay? But to go into these villages, you have to take a 4-wheel drive, maybe about 2 or 3 hours into the rural areas. It's quite deep. One thing about these Rumus, they believe in a lot of spiritual beliefs. And the village that I went to was the Kampung Baban Gazo, Kampung Tinanggo, Kampung Minyak, and Kampung Pako. Again, the Rumus family is still there. They still live in long houses, but now the long houses are being built by the government, previous government, which is, again, look like a asrama. I think that it looks like asrama rather than long houses. Okay, again, the Rumus Longhouse is built for communities and families, not for individuals. This is how it looks like. It still exists, okay? It's been turned into a homestay now. Maranjak Longhouse is 100 meters long. It's very, very long. We took time to do the measure drawing for this longhouse because too long, okay? And to show the floor plan, I only showed you part of it because it's too long again. This is part of the units where the people live, okay? I want to show you the floor plans. The Ongkop is a 1-bedroom, only meant for women, okay? The men slept on in the Apat Tingkang area, male sleeping area. Again, it's open to the environment. Yeah, tak ada dinding, there's no wall, it's open, so maknanya the men will suffer the mosquitoes, but the women will have this bedroom privacy as well. And then because the Ropukan is where they cook inside, where the kitchen is, okay, the Ropukan area. Again, these are the division between domains of women and men, okay? And the communal area is a Lapat Langsang, where people gather together and have meetings. Okay, this is one interesting part about the Rumus Longhouse. It's called Rorizan or tower. Rorizan is a tower not for security reason, okay? Can you guess what that is for? Okay, Rorizan is a tower to keep your women, or no, to keep your daughters. When you reach 16 years old, you put your daughters up in the tower so she can look around for future husbands. So they kept it there. So that means when the women got to choose their men, but not the other way around. Unlike the now community is different. So the women have the what they call it, privilege, looking, oh, I want that one, you know, rather than being chosen to get married, that kind of thing. Right, the architecture company talk about it, it's still being used over there. The Rumus Longhouse, a bamboo floor, 3-bark wall, Nipah roof, rattan frames, and public area, again, it's huge, yeah? It's very big and quite long as well. With the 3-bark for the walls and the Nipah roof for that, sloping wall. The reason why for the sloping wall, again, so the water doesn't stay on the wall when it rains. It goes down because of the gravity. So it's 100 meters long, 20 rooms, over 100 inhabitants at one time. So that's how big that is, the house. That's how it looks like. And also, another one is Kampung Paku Longhouse, 50 meters long. Most of the time, underneath the house, there are rare pigs. Yeah, so the chicken and pigs, these are their favorite animals. But these animals are kept for food sources. Okay, this is the sad one. Tinakon Dazang Longhouse no longer exists. As of last year, it was demolished. So no more longhouse like this. Okay, one thing about special feature of this Rumus Longhouse called The communities control the governing body or the governing feature or the figure in this family community is the Bobohizans or the highest priestess. So it's a more of a matriarchal society. Bobohizans are usually women, very old women, and descendants of women who were priestess before. So they control all decision in making for the community. So whatever ritual, whatever marriage or funeral will be done by Bobohizans. Okay, that's how they are very sexy actually with their costume, but again, the rituals also always involve piglets. Yeah. So these are the Rungus Longhouse, where the connection between the traditional Malay architecture, but the things that really influence the belief of the architecture language is the culture of the own individual. So in my summary, the heritage design has outlined cultural interpretation reflected in the architecture components and space planning, and also in the physical and psychological factors, location and climate for the architecture, and strong cultural beliefs and religious understanding depending on where you are, create an aesthetically pleasing architecture, and tangible and intangible cultural values that create the architectural language. Thank you very much.